All right, welcome back to Booked, the podcast that helps you get booked on podcast. I am Spencer Carpenter, and this is my co-host.
Amanda Foley.
And on today's episode, what we're going to cover is when should an entrepreneur or someone that wants to be a thought leader, when should they start going on podcast? And, you know, I'm sure there's a few different ways to answer this, but I've definitely encountered people that have tons of experience but don't think they're ready, and people that have no experience but all the confidence and they want to go on podcasts. So, coming from a PR background, like how does that influence your opinion of this?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the great thing about podcasts, which is like why I love it coming from a traditional PR background, because when you work traditionally, in PR, you have to have news to get coverage in most cases. I mean, sometimes you could get features. There's other ways of doing it. But, we would always look for these opportunities for clients between the news. How do we get them out there? How do we get them to tell their story? Because people ultimately want to know you in order to buy something from you or work with you, whatever it might be. Different, like from my background, but generally speaking. And the great thing about podcasts is that there are so many of them covering so many different topics, all looking for content all the time. And if you can understand what you're offering, to whom, make it interesting, and be open to getting personal with a host, I think that there are podcasts for anybody that wants to go on podcasts. And that's what I think is so cool about it, is you don't necessarily ever have to be, I would say it's more about having the foundations of your business in place, because you don't want to go on a podcast and not ultimately have it be clear what you want people to take away or do at the end of it.
Right.
But if you know that and you have the ways to capture them, like we've talked about lead magnets and things like that, if you have a way to pull them in, whether it's an email list, a social media feed, as long as you can grab these people to add them to your, let's call it your warm audience, then there's value.
Yeah. And it's also about what is success look like to you in going on podcast. Because I mentioned before, I've done 36 podcasts where I had no lead magnet, no call to action. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to help my SEO. I wanted to get some content. I wanted to connect with hosts. And I was good with that.
Yeah.
Now I have developed a lead magnet. I'm actually recommending to most people that start with me, at least have that in place, so that you can do more than, say, book a call with me. But, I've had people that, like I've mentioned I work a lot with people in the real estate space. I have some people that they know to start raising capital from investors, they need to be a little more well-known in the space. And so that's why they're going on. They weren't known before. But they've successfully made a few $1 million in real estate and they're ready to do it. I also have somebody that he has 2.7 billion in real estate and did no press whatsoever. And now he's ready to go on podcasts. And it's funny because they have two very different levels of experience, but they're coming to me at the same time saying, I want to be on podcasts now.
Yeah.
And so I've always said to people is like, it is great to work out some of what you're, not proprietary, but like some of what you would want to teach people and how it's a little bit unique. You can't just say the same thing everyone else has said. Yep. You also don't need to create a whole new investing strategy or a whole new AI tool.
People can do the same things, but I think it's people like to work with people because they like them.
Yes.
Or there's something, that's not the only reason, but that's a big reason. If you have two people that are equal on paper, you're going to want to work with the one that you like better.
Yes.
It's usually how people are going to make that decision.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, it really does ultimately depend on the objective, because I've had people come to me and, especially coaches, they're like, I want to book sessions off the heels of this. And I'm like, that could happen, but that's not what this is for.
Right.
And I'm really clear with people, because I think you want to bring people into your world and you want them to get to know you a little bit better. But then on the heels of that, it's their job to then keep nurturing those relationships. So some people may book. I've had clients that have had a lot of success on that front, but I will forever and always maintain that PR is not a sales tool.
Right.
It's a supportive, it's a sort of like it's a hand holder with marketing, and the marketing then has to pick up from there and carry the ball.
Well, it's also easier to chase someone, not chase them, but to try and, it's like what is the level of your call to action? Is your call to action spend $20,000?
Right. Or follow me on Instagram,
or follow
right?
me, or like
On LinkedIn,
join my
whatever.
email list and kind of
Which is
nurture
really
that
what
further.
it should be. I mean, in most cases, that's how, and what I'll say too, and will at some point have a much longer discussion on this too, but that's the benefit of working with somebody that actually understands PR strategy and is not just a booker that's, kind of pushing you out just
Right.
in mass. Because I think, I know for me, I work with each client to be like, okay, what is your objective? Make sure that they're clear, they understand the limitations and the possibilities, and then ensure that they have the right pieces in place to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, I have had people come to me and say, well, I want to start going on podcasts, but I'm actually not looking to really capitalize on it for like another year. And it's like, well, then do you want to hold off a year, or do you want to do some smaller podcasts in the meantime and hope that builds up to the bigger one in a year when you actually have that book release?
The latter is the other thing that I think people don't think about all the time. I was just having this discussion with someone the other day about paying to go on some of the big podcasts. And what I'll say is that I have literally I mean, I've been in PR for 20 plus years, but I've been doing this for about 5. I've never had a client have to pay to go on a podcast. And, and I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for that. If you're selling a product and you know that it might cost you $40,000 to go on that show, but you'll sell $100,000 in product. And I have friends that work with clients that do that all the time. Go for it. But if you're, from a services perspective, that's a very different sales model and like sales journey, let's say, like with a customer or potential client. And so I think that it's really important to know that if you don't do the laddering and you don't start with the small shows, it's going to be really hard to get on those bigger shows if you want to do it on an earned basis.
Yeah. I think, let's just say you are going to chase the top 50 podcasts in a category. They need to see you've done something, but they don't want to see that you've done 300 episodes and all of them were the same.
Yeah.
I do think that, just using the example of some of the big like Diary of a CEO, they don't want to see that you did 25
they need
of the
a
same
unique
story.
topic.
Yeah, they
too.
need something new there if they're going. I mean, but by the way, you still need to have the massive social media audience already.
Yeah.
Probably to even make that happen. But I'm pitching someone to Diary of a CEO right now that was on in 2022, and maybe they'll say yes, but if we don't present something new to them,
they don't want to have the same conversation.
Yeah, they're not going to want to have him back on. And so it is about, in that example, it's about timing and the perspective.
It's very
and
strategic.
Things like that.
And it's funny, I just pitched them yesterday.
Did you? I want to hear about.
I'll talk. We can talk about that later.
But I've also, perspective is also important. You could actually have no real unique value prop, but have perspective.
Oh, 100% agree.
And I've gone on 5 podcasts about real estate investment. I'm a real estate investor, but I'm very novice. I'm not an expert by any means.
You're a hobbyist.
I'm a hobbyist. Well, I'm just, I haven't gotten there far enough yet. But I have gone on several real estate podcasts to actually talk about how my first deal was a complete and total shit show. Because that was perspective in like,
what you
look
learned,
out for
right?
these. Yes, exactly. And so even though I was not there to tell people how you're going to make $1 million with real estate, it was, here are some things I learned after listening to 200 plus real estate
Here's
podcasts.
the wisdom.
Here's what I still missed out on.
So you don't replicate my mistakes.
Yes. And so perspective is important. And so,
well, agree. And that's why I also think too, to go back to say, that's why you have to look at every show and you have to look at each client's objectives. And then they might be going on 3 shows, but they might have different perspective for each of those particular shows based on a nuance that host cares about.
Well, and that's important if you're going into something where the subject matter is already a little more sophisticated. So like I always go back to the example of like financial planners or real estate agents, because definitionally, what most of them do is very similar. And so if you're going onto a very broad show, just understanding the basics of what you would tell your customer as a financial planner or a real estate agent can be fine. You have more experience than the average person, and that can show through on a more broad podcast. Now, if the podcast is about being a successful real estate agent or being a successful financial planner, it's more industry focused.
Exactly.
You then have to bring...
Versus like a more general entrepreneurial type show where you're bringing the expertise. Well, that's, I think, where, again, it's perfect segue to say, in some places you bring the expertise, in others you bring the perspective.
Right. And so there have been times where I had depending on what types of shows people wanted to go on, they might have said, well, I want to go on a mix. I'm like, okay, well then we need to have two different sets of topics, or maybe a mix of...
Yeah. I limit it to like 3 because I feel like anything, even 3 is a lot, like 2 to 3 sort of, let's call them genres. Yeah. I think is the
yeah. In terms of topics, I normally pitch about... I used to do like 4 to 6. Now I stick to trying probably 4 to 5.
Oh, you mean like the talking points with it?
Oh, yeah, But I used to mix them up where it would be like 3 that were surface level and 3 that were more sophisticated. And either, route the host went, it was usually more than enough for the episode.
Yeah.
But now I've kind of honed in on that a little bit more. I kind of just stick to 4. And so if somebody really wants to have a mix, we should probably have 2 different pitches and that are going to the different shows.
Yeah.
And so from there, what we laid out here is, it's great to have your foundation so you can actually have a real call to action and maybe see some success.
Or at least know your message, right? Like you're saying, even if it's just giving perspective and you're not necessarily trying to ultimately sell something, however many steps
and some people just get reps in. Like,
yeah, it's practice. I call it market research too. So that's another thing. Like you learn a lot by the questions that you get asked on podcasts.
Yeah. Well, that guy that has, 2.7 billion in assets, they actually booked a podcast internally, but put it on the spreadsheet with the podcast that I booked for them. And they're like, hey, we don't really want to go on shows like that anymore. I'm like, well, 1, you booked it. But 2...
Yeah, but you learn from that too.
You've only done 2 episodes.
But that's the great thing.
And you needed to work on the messaging.
Not everything, and that's the other thing, it's really easy to pivot with podcasts too. So if you start to learn, and not everything's going to be a home run, even if it's everything, if all the pieces are aligned, there's always going to be like a mismatch here and there that happens.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, that's the great thing, is the client can come to us and say, now that I've done 1 or 2 shows, which is fairly low commitment in the grand scheme of a campaign, I actually realize that I get a lot more when I do these types of shows versus those, those.
Well, and in the example of this client, they actually said, we noticed when one of the hosts was taking notes about things we were saying. So now we want to change up our messaging to focus on that.
Right, because that's the market research piece, because you see what people are interested in.
A lot of the messaging I have or things I say on calls, I worked through being on podcasts.
Yep. It gives you a lot of clarity in conversation.
Just analogies or examples that I came up with were through this free-form discussion, not from practicing sales calls.
Exactly. Or sitting and thinking in circles.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so the last point is really your confidence level. And I've had people come to me and say, like, I don't know if podcasts are right for me because I'm very introverted. Well, podcasts are this. It's one-on-one.
Yeah, which most introverts are fine with one. It's not, you're not in like a giant social situation. Agree.
And the post, the post product might go out to dozens or hundreds or thousands of people. But when it's actually happening, it's just us and Gabe is here. It's just the 3 of us. And so that it is a platform that is good for introverts and extroverts and people of all confidence levels. And also, if you are nervous about saying the wrong thing or maybe not entirely knowing what you want to say, but working through that, if you find yourself in a bad spot, you can say to the host, like, hold on, can we pause and like cut that part out? I want to try again.
Yeah.
And it's fine. This isn't live. There are some podcasts that go live, but they'll tell you. And it's usually just to like Instagram or Facebook or something. It's still not to thousands.
And most people aren't expecting perfection from podcasts either.
No. And that's the great thing about it.
But that's why, like, to the point earlier, you start small. And then you know that it's a smaller audience. And honestly, I think, this is just, I'll let my like somewhat woo side come out here, but I think people feel you more than hear you in a lot of cases
for
too.
Sure.
And I think sometimes what we feel are these, big mistakes, or we trip over words, or we don't articulate something. I think we have to also learn, anybody, I tell my clients this, like most of my clients already understand this, but you have to trust yourself and what wants to come out. And I think if you do that in the moment and don't overthink what you're saying, 9 times out of 10,
Yeah.
It's going to be just fine. Like you'd have to do something pretty egregious,
Sure.
I think, to, mortify yourself on a podcast, like especially the smaller ones.
And well,
you don't want to blow your shot with,
and
with
if ultimately
Stephen
you
Bartlett,
feel
but
that bad about it, you could ask them like,
they wouldn't run the episode. You could say, don't run the episode.
I don't want to do this. So it's, to kind of wrap this up, I think that step 1 is understanding no matter your confidence level, you can kind of work through it.
Yeah.
2 is figuring out, do you have unique value prop or do you have perspective? And if not, if you really only have the most generic information to provide from your industry, and I don't mean generic in a bad way, I just mean most surface level, take that into consideration when you are pitching shows. Maybe don't be going for the one that has more sophisticated conversations around your industry if you haven't worked out what the unique value prop is.
And so that could be your personal experience sometimes too, or
true.
your personal, your personal perspective is where you add there.
Yeah. And then lastly, which is the topic we started with first, is foundations of your business.
Yep.
You could be like me where I did 3 dozen and I just wanted to go talk and I'm fine with that.
Yep.
Most people, especially if they're hiring a podcast booking agent or someone like us to work with, they want to see a return. So at least set yourself up for success.
Right. Like you don't want someone to find a podcast that you did a year later and then look for you and be like, oh, they were a coach and now they're
True.
I don't know, doing something completely. And not to say that that doesn't happen, but you don't necessarily want to invest in that unless you're pretty confident that your business is going to continue in the direction that you're already heading.
Yeah. And so having some clear call to action, whatever it is, that could be, please follow me on Instagram, or I'm very active I like to say I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you have a newsletter or you have created that freebie lead magnet. And I mean, through doing it myself, I've just realized how easy it is to create that, so hire someone on Fiverr or just ask someone on LinkedIn, who has experience.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, or that. And it could be, hey, some people have made their own GPTs as a lead magnet.
I know a lot of people that do that. Yeah, and then they actually then sell into a bigger paid version of the GPT. Yeah. And I mean, I want to add too, you can do this whether it's with people like us or if people are pitching themselves just to get started too, right? So these are tips I think that anybody could take away and apply if they're wondering themselves, like, should I be out there on podcast?
Yep.
Ask yourself these questions. This could be a lead magnet for us, right?
Yeah, perfect.
And then, ask yourself these questions and then I always say, go find a podcast you like, even if it's a smaller one or somebody that is doing something similar to what you're doing and see what shows they've been on and what perspective could you add. And then I think that even gives people the confidence to say, oh, well, like I could share this. They totally skipped over this topic.
It's funny you say that. My lead magnet is a worksheet that has my KAORs, keywords, audience outcomes, and reputable figures. And the keywords, audience, and outcomes are used to research shows and develop topics that are relevant to those shows, but reputable figures is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, like you find peers that are talking about similar topics.
And it's not, you look up Tony Robbins, it's go to the person.
Or maybe even like one step above,
one or two steps above, see where they've been, and then go to those shows because you then know they're open to that type of conversation.
Yes.
So you could do
that's
the same
a great
thing
lead magnet because I think sometimes people are really overwhelmed. It seems like a lot of steps, and not to minimize what we do because I think it can get pretty complex when you're working with higher level clients, of course. But I also think that if you kind of follow your interests in this space, it can actually be really, because I've had people that I've had conversations with, even just like as a favor to say like, here's what I would do if I were you. And they're like, I just went and pitched myself to this podcast that I liked. I used the tips you gave me, how to structure my pitch, and they said yes. And so I think sometimes as people are really surprised that it doesn't mean it's always easy, but I think people also don't think it's possible until they actually take that first step.
It comes more down to, do you have the time to... Everybody has the time to pitch one podcast they really want.
It's the consistency.
And that could be finding the email, the LinkedIn, and the Instagram and messaging all of them over time. I think most people can also do that with 10 shows. But you might strike out on all 10. You
Yeah.
need someone that has more time to
Well, I
develop
would say,
all
like,
of that.
overall, what would you say returns is like a different conversation, but just since we're talking about this, because I think people get discouraged is the other thing. I would say if you're getting a 10 to 1 return, or what is it, like a 1 out of 10% return on your pitches, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I have a large open rate. I also reach out to a lot of shows.
Yeah, my
but
open rate is like almost 100%.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's usually like 1 in 10.
Yeah.
Sometimes, depending on the sizes of the show, it could be more like even up to 1 in 20.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people get discouraged by, because you don't even get a boo or a no half the time from most of the hosts.
Rarely get a no.
So you have to be persistent.
It's just ignored.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're getting off topic. We'll wrap this one up. But yeah, go back over, figure out, do you have the unique value prop, or do you have perspective, or are you going more broad? And then figure out what types of shows from there. And then determine, are you ready to go right now, or do you want to set up more of the foundation of your business with, lead magnet or something to track in all of these? But I will say, I loved going on my podcast with no ulterior motive.
Yeah.
And nothing to gain
You
from
just
it.
go
I
and
just
riff.
like doing it. So I always recommend to people, especially with tools like Podmatch out there, you can find a link for Podmatch in the description of the show. You can just go set this up real quick and get on some shows and have fun with it and figure it out from there. So join us again on our next episode. Again, my name is Spencer Carpenter with Outlier Audio. This is
Amanda Foley with Curate Your Soul.
And this is Booked, the podcast that helps you get booked on more podcasts. Thanks for joining us.